Hi, it's Katrina. Number 10. Bridge of the Inca. The Bridge of the Inca is a fascinating monument and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It can be found high up in the Andes Mountains in Argentina, somewhere around 7,000 feet above sea level. The place is fascinating for two main reasons. First of all, it's a natural bridge and one of the most striking geological places in all of South America. Secondly, the Inca used the Puente del Inca as part of their vast road network. The whole region is riddled with ancient ruins, yet the bridge itself is 100% natural. The Inca didn't need to do anything in terms of construction. The bridge was already there. But of course, the Inca had some pretty cool legends surrounding the bridge. It's said that the heir to the throne of the empire was affected by a strange and mysterious paralysis. Healers recommended that the heir go from Cusco to the slopes of the Inca bridge to heal in the natural springs. But when they reached it, there was no bridge there. Inca warriors had to embrace each other and form a human bridge so that the paralyzed heir could be brought across. The heir was then dipped in the hot springs and magically healed. When he turned around, the Inca warriors had all petrified, creating the stone bridge that still stands today. Number 9. A face in the mountain. A large and very mysterious face was recently found on the cliffside of an island in the Pacific Rim National Park Reserve. The face is exactly what it sounds like, a truly huge human face carved out of the rock on the side of a cliff in the absolute middle of nowhere. The face can be found on Reeks Island in British Columbia, Canada. This is not a place you can reach very easily and rarely sees human visitors. The person who found the face carved high up in the mountainous terrain of the island was Hank Gus, a member of the Teshat First Nation. Hank had heard about the face from a kayaker who saw it by accident. It then took Hank 2 years of tireless searching to finally find it himself. Now that's dedication. Have you ever been that dedicated to finding anything? Tell me about your experience in the comments. The face is about 7 feet tall and looks strikingly like some other faces made by the ancient Teshat people. They have been living in this part of British Columbia for thousands of years, so it's no surprise that there are still some archaeological treasures lying around undiscovered. This is one of the largest areas of untouched nature still left in the world, where massive stone faces can still go unseen for years. Number 8. Prehistoric Campers. An interesting new study has given some insight into the patterns of mountain people in America 11,000 years ago. It was in the year 2006 that Dr. Richard Adams, an archaeologist from Laramie, Wyoming, discovered a prehistoric settlement 11,000 feet high in the mountains of Wyoming. It was an amazing discovery that turned the world of American archaeology upside down. Nobody had thought there would be an alpine village hidden so high in the mountains. It was assumed the native people lived in the flatlands and wouldn't have bothered going up so high. Archaeologists found pottery, bone tools, arrowheads, and other evidence that some primitive group had been there at least 2,000 years ago. Then the researchers started spreading out across the mountain ridges. They came across other sites, dozens of them, some over 11,000 years old. As it turned out, the mountain wilderness of Wyoming has been a popular destination for human settlers since around the time humans first arrived in America. People hunted in the mountain peaks, lived in basic huts, and didn't seem to mind the weather at all. But who exactly these people were, how extensive their settlements may have been, and where they went is still a total mystery. Number 7. Lost City on the Mountain. Archaeologists discovered a lost city on the top of a Greek mountain that dates back 2,500 years. The fact that nobody ever found it until recently is kind of hard to imagine. It was in 2016 that the international team of Swedish and Greek archaeologists came across the lost city buried underneath the earth, 190 miles from Athens and way above sea level. It was found literally in the clouds on the Strongylovuni Hill, which is on the Thessalian plains. According to researcher Robin Runland, an expert in classical archaeology and ancient history, he and his team learned that nobody had ever explored this particular hill before. They didn't know what they were going to find, but knew it hadn't been looked at by archaeologists yet. So they climbed to its summit and found a city covering an area of 99 acres. They discovered walls and towers and were even greeted by the city gates upon their arrival. Though, of course, none of this was visible from the ground below. The only way to see it was by actually climbing the mountain and reaching its peak, which nobody had done before. It was one of the last explored places in Greece and is still stumping scientists today. Researchers found pottery, coins, and other artifacts that have dated the city back to 500 BC. However, why it was abandoned, who founded the city in the first place, and what in the world it was doing on the top of a mountain are all questions that have still yet to be answered. Do you think there are any other unexplored places like this where an ancient city is sitting untouched, waiting to be found? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. We've got lots more videos like these coming soon. Number 6. Ancient Cave Artifacts. A discovery in a Mexican cave located deep in a rural mountain range may just be changing the timeline of human arrivals in America. For pretty much all the 20th century, archaeologists have agreed that human beings crossed the land bridge from Siberia and entered North America no later than 1,300 years ago. Now, a new study at Chiquihuite Cave by researchers with the Autonomous University of Zacatecas has pushed the date back to 26,500 years. The cave, 9,000 feet above sea level in the Astillero Mountains, has revealed stone artifacts, tools used for cutting, animal bones, pieces of charcoal, and sediment samples, all dated over 26,000 years old. The consensus here is that humans came from Siberia much earlier than ever imagined, but that they meandered up into the mountains and lived in caves instead of building settlements. They very well could have lived in caves for 10,000 years until finally moving down into the lowlands, building settlements, and slowly evolving with the rest of humanity in other parts of the world. Would you want to live in a cave? Let me know in the comments below. Number 5. Chokakirao. The Cradle of Gold, also known as Chokakirao, was built by the great Inca Empire sometime in the 15th century. It covers a massive area of over 4,000 acres and is a shocking 9,000 feet above sea level. Forget about Machu Picchu, this is the true lost mountain city of the Inca. It overlooks the Apurimac River, probably founded by Topa Yupanqui, the 10th Sapa Inca and 5th ruler of the Hanan dynasty. He was also the son of Pachacuti, who was responsible for founding Machu Picchu. As you can probably tell, nearly every great ruler seemed obsessed with commissioning their very own city. Machu Picchu was so great that Yopa Yupanqui couldn't help himself but try to imitate it. He went a few miles down the road, up another mountain, and then built his city there. But there are other cities in the area as well, each of them way up in the Andes. There is Sayhuite, Chachabamba, Guamanmarca, and Choquesuyus, all of them strikingly similar to Machu Picchu in terms of architectural style and construction techniques. Each of these sites is centered around a pair of main plazas on the very highest crest of a mountain ridge. The cities all contain temples, dwellings for the highest status members of the communities, bathing systems, common houses, and cultivated agricultural areas. And the same can be said of Chokakirao, but this city is a little special in the sense that it had a lot of religious structures. The site also aligns directly with the solstices in June and December, making it one of the most important places in the Inca Empire for ceremonial activities. It was also a very important place following the Spanish conquest in the 1500s. Even after the Inca Empire collapsed, a stronghold of Neo-Inca survivors was established here in 1537. They survived until the death of the last Inca ruler, Tupac Amaru, 40 years later. Why do you think ancient rulers loved building cities so high in the mountains? Let me know your theories below. Number 4. Biblical Scrolls. High above the salty flats of the Dead Sea, way above the Judean desert and its rough brown hills, there are mountain caves filled with treasure. At least the caves used to be filled with treasure. Of course, this is the mountainous region in Israel, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were first discovered in the 1950s by Bedouin shepherds. After the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, people from all over descended on the area and dug through every cave they could find in hopes of discovering a fragment and making some cash. It was a catastrophe for archaeologists. But there was one cave that was extraordinarily difficult to reach, a place nicknamed the Cave of Horror. It's about 260 feet directly beneath the top of a cliff, flanked by steep gorges and only accessible by rappelling straight down on a sheer cliff wall. It wasn't exactly an easy place for scavengers to search for scroll fragments 70 years ago. And so it's no surprise that recently dozens of biblical scroll pieces were taken from the cave by professional archaeologists with the latest equipment. Amazingly, these were the first finds of their kind in over 60 years. Archaeologists found fragments written in Greek from the biblical books of Zechariah, Nahum, and the book of the 12 Minor Prophets. Even more fascinating is that the team discovered a perfectly woven basket from 10,500 years ago, making it the oldest complete basket ever found. They also came across the mummified remains of a child 6,000 years old. Not only was the cave used by early Jews to hide fragments of religious work, but it also appears to have been occupied by cave people. How they managed to get to and from such a precarious spot is a huge mystery. How do you think they got there? Number 3. Lost Viking Village. On a remote pass in the Norwegian mountains, archaeologists came across a Viking settlement. Of course, nothing remains of the settlement today except marks in the ground where it had once stood. But there was one here, and it was huge. The settlement was found on a mountain trail that's been the source of many discoveries over the past few years. Because of Norway's melting glaciers, the mountain pass here has been revealing thousands of artifacts, things like household items, broken sleds, lost skis, pieces of clothing, and all kinds of other artifacts. A total of 21 structures have been discovered so far in this mountain pass, in an area completely covered by thick juniper bushes. You would never even imagine there had been buildings here because the whole place is overgrown with bushes. There's nothing left except impressions on the ground. It wasn't until archaeologists like Reidar Marstein and Lars Pilo started digging beneath the dirt that they were able to find scraps of outer walls and evidence of low embankments. It took a lot of work, and excavations are still ongoing, but there was a huge city here high up in the mountains between 750 and 1150 AD. That's roughly the entire time the Viking Age lasted. What that means is that while the Vikings were pillaging and terrorizing, and while people in Norway were moving through the mountains from one place to another, this settlement acted as a waypoint. It was a fully functioning city that catered to travelers moving across the brutal landscape. Would you rather explore snow-covered mountaintops or mountains in a warm climate? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Number 2. Sacrifices to the god Zeus. On the top of a Greek mountain, archaeologists found something gruesome and altogether terrifying. They found the skeleton of a teenager, along with scraps of other bones and ashes. Why were there so many bones and ashes on top of the mountain? It's because they had likely been sacrificed to the god Zeus. The teenager was found without a head, laid down on a pile of ash 3,000 years ago at the peak of Lycaon Mountain. It's fascinating because never before have archaeologists found proof that a human sacrifice did take place at an altar to Zeus. Yet here, where a small temple and altar were constructed in dedication to the Lord of Olympus, somebody had been ritualistically murdered. Even though there were all kinds of ritual sacrifices going on in places like Carthage, the Inca Empire, the Aztecs, and many other places, it wasn't a thing for the Greeks. Yet there was one cult so nefarious that even Plato wrote about the horrifying human sacrifices they made in the name of Zeus. Archaeologists always thought these writings were just myths, like what Plato wrote of Atlantis. But now they've discovered an actual sacrificial victim on a mountaintop. It looks like there may have been a real cult that killed people. Number 1. The White Mountain Petroglyphs. Wyoming's White Mountain formed sometime over 30 million years ago. It can be found north of Rock Springs in the Red Desert and boasts some of the most fascinating petroglyphs ever found at this altitude. High up in the mountain, carved into its white rock, you can discover ancient drawings of animals like bison and elk that were at least 1,000 years old. There are also small footprints, handprints, and geometric forms of great mystery scratched into the mountain, and even one picture of a warrior shown brandishing a sword. This is pretty bizarre, because the Native American people who drew these petroglyphs, members of tribes like the Shoshone and the Arapaho, didn't use medieval swords. So what was it? That is the question. Thanks for watching. What's your favorite lost city in the mountains? Let me know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. See you soon. Bye!